Imagine being blamed for crimes you didn't commit simply for exercising your constitutional rights. That's the absurd reality American gun owners are facing as Mexico launches a $10 billion assault on U.S. gun manufacturers. They're claiming that firearms smuggled from the United States are fueling cartel violence. But is that really the whole story? In this video, we'll talk about Mexico's controversial lawsuit, its far-reaching implications for gun rights, and how Trump has stepped in to defend the Second Amendment. We'll unpack how the lawsuit cleverly aligns with anti-gun agendas, the real origins of cartel weaponry, and why Trump's border policies could be the game-changer. So what's the big deal, you may ask? Well, if Mexico succeeds, this case could set a dangerous precedent and open the floodgates for more attacks on American gun rights. But Trump's tough stance on illegal immigration, his support for gun manufacturers, and his judicial appointments might already be changing the game. But why is Mexico pointing fingers at America? And where's all this going? Stick around, we'll find out. So, like me, most of you might have already forgotten that it was in August 2021 when the Mexican government audaciously filed a $10 billion lawsuit against prominent U.S. gun manufacturers, including Smith & Wesson, Beretta, Glock, and Ruger. Mexico alleges that these companies have knowingly profited from firearms smuggled into their country and used by violent drug cartels. Initially, a U.S. district court dismissed this far-fetched lawsuit, recognizing the broad legal protections afforded to firearm manufacturers under U.S. law. But in a baffling turn of events, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the First Circuit revived the case in January 2024, allowing Mexico's baseless claims to proceed. To make matters worse, Democratic-led states have thrown their support behind Mexico's lawsuit, effectively siding against American businesses and constitutional rights. If this lawsuit succeeds, it could set a dangerous precedent, holding gun manufacturers liable for crimes committed with their products, an absurd notion that undermines personal responsibility and the Second Amendment. Such a precedent would open the floodgates of hell for frivolous lawsuits, which in turn would be an additional threat to the very existence of the firearms industry and erode Americans' constitutional rights. The Supreme Court has agreed to hear the case, and its decision will have profound implications for the future of gun rights in America. There's a pretty good chance that the court will recognize the absurdity of Mexico's claims and uphold the legal protections that shield manufacturers from being unjustly blamed for the actions of criminals. Let's talk about Mexico's misleading claims and expose the truth behind the origins of cartel weaponry. The narrative that U.S. gun manufacturers are responsible for Mexico's cartel violence is not only false, but also a blatant attempt to deflect from its own failures in combating cartel violence. The Mexican government claims that 70% of firearms used by cartels originate from the United States, a figure that crumbles under scrutiny. That's because, according to the ATF, only about 12% of firearms recovered in Mexico and submitted for tracing between 2016 and 2021 were traced back to the U.S. And remember, the ATF has never been on our side, yet their figures expose Mexico's manipulation of data to scapegoat American gun makers. Common sense dictates that Mexico skewed the statistics and selectively submitted only certain firearms for tracing, those likely sourced from the U.S., just to support its unfounded allegations. In a nutshell, what they're doing is they're not taking into account all the weapons flowing into Mexico from other regions, including Asia and Central America. And besides, a significant number of firearms are funneled to cartels through Mexican military deserters who abscond with their service weapons, and this further complicates the true sources of cartel armament. For decades, corruption has permeated Mexican politics and law enforcement, creating an environment where cartels thrive with impunity. This systemic corruption has facilitated the rise and entrenchment of powerful drug cartels, undermining the rule of law and perpetuating violence. A glaring example is the case of Genaro Garcia Luna, Mexico's former Secretary of Public Security. Tasked with leading the nation's anti-drug efforts from 2006 to 2012, Garcia Luna was convicted in the United States in 2023 for accepting millions in bribes from the Sinaloa cartel. These bribes enabled the cartel to operate with impunity, facilitating the trafficking of vast quantities of drugs into the U.S. The infiltration of cartels into law enforcement is further exemplified by the Sinaloa cartel's extensive corruption of Mexican police forces. Reports indicate that the cartel bribed officers to act as enforcers and to protect its operations, effectively turning law enforcement into a tool of organized crime. Political corruption has also played a significant role. The Institutional Revolutionary Party, which dominated Mexican politics for much of the 20th century, forged alliances with drug traffickers, sanctioning their activities in exchange for political support. This collusion allowed cartels to flourish under the protection of the state. These instances illustrate how corruption at various levels of government has created a fertile ground for cartels, enabling them to expand their influence and operations with little fear of reprisal. But instead of addressing these systemic issues, Mexico has the nerve to point fingers at U.S. gun manufacturers. This lawsuit is not just a legal maneuver, it's a strategic deflection. This blame game by Mexico's government is a transparent effort to absolve itself of responsibility and to mask the corruption and inefficacy that have allowed cartels to flourish. But where and when did it all start? In the 1980s, as Colombian cartels faced increased pressure, Mexican drug trafficking organizations seized the opportunity to dominate the narcotics trade. They evolved from mere couriers to major players in global organized crime, establishing sophisticated networks that now span continents. The Sinaloa and Jalisco New Generation cartels are prime examples of this transformation. The Sinaloa cartel, once led by Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, has become one of the most powerful drug trafficking organizations worldwide. Its operations extend across the United States and into Europe, flooding these regions with illicit drugs. Similarly, the CJNG, under Nemesio El Mencho Oseguera Cervantes, has rapidly expanded its influence, becoming a dominant force in the drug trade. These cartels have infiltrated every corner of the United States. A year-long operation by the DEA, known as Operation Last Mile, targeted associates of the Sinaloa and Jalisco cartels operating within U.S. borders. The operation revealed that these cartels use multi-city distribution networks, violent local street gangs, and individual dealers to flood American communities with fentanyl and methamphetamine, driving addiction and causing countless deaths. The reach of these cartels is not limited to the United States. They have established operations in dozens of countries, creating a global network that facilitates the production and distribution of narcotics. This expansion has been facilitated by their ability to adapt and evolve, exploiting new markets, and establishing alliances with other criminal organizations. The economic impact of these cartels is staggering. In some regions of Mexico, they are among the largest employers, providing livelihoods in areas where legitimate opportunities are scarce. This economic dependency complicates efforts to eradicate them, as they have become entrenched in the social and economic fabric of these communities. The Mexican government's failure to address the root causes of cartel proliferation, again, corruption, poverty, and lack of economic opportunities, has allowed these organizations to flourish. Instead of taking responsibility, Mexico seeks to shift the blame onto U.S. entities. The hypocrisy is staggering. Good thing President Trump takes decisive action to defend American interests and uphold the Second Amendment, though as you probably already guessed, he's met with relentless criticism. Trump's impact on the judiciary is undeniable. By appointing conservative justices, he has fortified the Supreme Court against assaults on our gun rights. These appointments aren't just about filling seats. They're about preserving the very freedoms enshrined in our Constitution. With potential future appointments, Trump is poised to solidify a pro-Second Amendment majority, ensuring that our rights remain protected for generations. Recognizing the porous nature of our southern border, he brokered agreements with Mexico to deploy 25,000 Mexican Border Patrol agents, a move aimed at stemming the tide of illegal immigration and the smuggling of weapons and drugs. On the surface, it might look like mere posturing, but it's not. Rather, it's a step toward national security. When diplomacy falls short, Trump isn't afraid to wield economic power. He has threatened to cut financial aid to Mexico for its failure to address cartel violence effectively. This isn't about punishing a neighbor. It's about holding Mexico accountable for its role in the crisis. By leveraging economic sanctions, Trump sends a clear message. The United States will not bankroll incompetence or corruption. And perhaps most importantly, Trump's administration recognizes these tactics for what they are: cynical ploys to circumvent our democratic processes. He takes decisive action to defend American interests by making sure his policies on judicial appointments, border security, economic sanctions, and gun rights collectively reinforce a commitment to protect American citizens from external threats. It should be obvious how these policies intersect with ongoing legal battles and the preservation of our constitutional freedoms. Holding gun manufacturers liable for crimes committed with their products is as absurd as blaming car makers for drunk driving accidents. Yet, if Mexico's lawsuit prevails, it could set a dangerous precedent, opening the floodgates for frivolous lawsuits against gun makers. The inevitable result? Skyrocketing production costs, which will be passed down to consumers through higher prices. Worse still, manufacturers might be forced to scale back production or even shutter their operations, leading to a scarcity of firearms and ammunition for law-abiding citizens. This isn't just speculation. It's a direct threat to the availability and affordability of firearms in the U.S. But the implications go beyond economic strain. A victory for Mexico could embolden anti-gun activists to use similar legal strategies domestically, effectively bypassing the legislative process to impose gun control through the courts. This backdoor approach undermines democratic principles and poses a severe risk to the Second Amendment. By holding manufacturers accountable for the actions of criminals, we erode the very foundation of personal responsibility and constitutional rights. It's no coincidence that Democratic-led states are backing Mexico's lawsuit. This alignment isn't about seeking justice. It's a strategic move to advance domestic gun control agendas. By supporting Mexico's claims, these states aim to set a precedent that could be exploited to implement stricter gun laws nationwide, circumventing the will of the people and infringing upon individual liberties. The lawsuit serves as a Trojan horse, introducing restrictive measures under the guise of international accountability. If Mexico's lawsuit succeeds, it will open Pandora's box, encouraging other foreign entities to sue U.S. companies for issues rooted in their own governance failures. This sets a perilous precedent where American businesses and constitutional rights are held hostage to foreign legal actions. The floodgates would open for a barrage of lawsuits, each chipping away at the rights enshrined in the Constitution. The debate over holding gun manufacturers accountable is absurd beyond relief. Some on the anti-gun side like to dress this up as corporate responsibility, but let's call it what it really is: an outright attack on the Second Amendment and a shameless attempt to shift blame. It's beyond infuriating. Since 2008, the United States has funneled over $3 billion into Mexico under the Merida Initiative, aiming to combat transnational crime and bolster the rule of law. And what do we have to show for it? A tripling of Mexico's murder rate. The corruption within Mexico's political and law enforcement systems is staggering. Cartels have infiltrated every level, rendering any U.S. assistance virtually useless. The murder of DEA agent Enrique Kiki Camarena in the 1980s exposed the deep-rooted corruption that still plagues Mexico today. Yet we continue to pour money into this black hole, expecting different results. Throwing more money at Mexico isn't the solution. We need to focus on securing our own borders, implementing stringent measures to prevent the flow of drugs and illegal activities into the United States. This means bolstering border security, enhancing surveillance, and ensuring that our laws are enforced without compromise. Moreover, the U.S. must hold Mexico accountable. No more blank checks. It's high time Mexico cleans up its own house, rooting out corruption and severing the unholy alliances between officials and cartels. Our continued support should be contingent upon tangible, verifiable actions from the Mexican government. And that's it for this video. What do you think is going to happen to this lawsuit? Comment below, like, share, and subscribe to stay informed. Don't forget to click the bell icon for updates. Thanks for watching.